change can feel scary, unpredictable, uncomfortable, but what if I told you that the very thing you're afraid of is the thing God is using to elevate you, to shift you, to prepare you for what's next? You see, we often pray for growth, for breakthrough, for purpose. But when change shows up, we resist it, we question it. Sometimes we even run from it. But I want to remind you today, don't be afraid of change, because God is at work in your life. Even when things feel out of control, they're never out of his control. You didn't stumble into this moment by accident. This shift you're experiencing, this transition that's stretching your faith, it's not the end, it's the beginning. God is doing something new, something divine. And if you lean in instead of running away, you'll see his fingerprints all over it. So let's talk about how to face change with boldness, faith, and confidence, knowing that God is orchestrating something beautiful behind the scenes. You know, we all love to talk about purpose. We get excited when we hear sermons about destiny, but what we don't always like to talk about is the process, the change, the shift, that uncomfortable stretching season that doesn't feel like favor but is absolutely covered in God's fingerprints. And here's the truth, the raw, unfiltered truth. God uses change as a tool, not as a punishment. Change isn't the enemy. It's the evidence. It's the sign that God is doing something new. And I know. It doesn't always feel like that in the moment. In the moment, change can feel like abandonment, like instability, like the rug has been pulled out from under you. But baby girl, let me tell you something. Sometimes what feels like destruction is actually construction. God is building something in you, and when God starts building, he doesn't always give you the blueprint. That's what makes change so hard. We want to see the full picture. We want to know how it's all going to turn out. We want to have control, but faith isn't about control, it's about trust. It's about surrendering what you thought your life would look like so you can receive what God already knew it was meant to be, and I get it. Trusting in the middle of change, that's not easy, especially when the change feels like chaos, when the job ends, when the relationship falls apart, when the plan doesn't come together, when what you prayed for hasn't happened yet. You start asking, God, where are you in all of this? But what if I told you that God is right there in the shift? What if I told you that the very thing you're trying to resist is the thing that's making room for your next? Sometimes God has to disrupt what's familiar to develop what's divine. See, comfort zones are cute until they start keeping you from becoming that version of you that God is calling you to become. She's not in the comfort zone. She's not in the routine. She's not in the predictable. She's in the stretching. She's in the uncertainty. She's in the late nights and the silent prayers and the moments when you feel like you're walking on water with no life jacket. God says, I'll meet you in the waves. Because when change shows up, it reveals what's real. It shows you what you really believe. It exposes what you've been clinging to. Some of us have been holding on to positions, titles, environments, even people, not because they're God-ordained, but because they're familiar, and God is saying, I'm too intentional to let you settle for familiar when I've called you to freedom. That's why some doors had to close. That's why some connections had to dry up. That's why that plan didn't work out, because God didn't want you to become so committed to something temporary that you miss something eternal. He's not just trying to make you comfortable, he's trying to make you complete. So don't despise the disruption, don't curse the change, don't resist the movement, because it's doing more than you can see right now. There's something being born in this moment even if you can't feel it yet. Sometimes God will let the winds blow just to see if your roots can hold. He'll shake things up not to break you, but to bless you. He'll remove the scaffolding so you can see how strong the foundation really is. And can I tell you something else? If everything around you is shifting, but you're still standing, that's proof that God is with you. That's not by accident. That's not your strength alone. That's grace. That's the hand of God holding you steady while the storm is swirling. That's evidence that even when everything changes, he remains the same. So breathe. Yes, I know the change came without warning. Yes, I know it caught you off guard. Yes, I know it hurt, but you're still here. And if you're still here, that means there's still purpose on your life. That means there's still a reason to press forward. That means God isn't finished yet. And the change that made you cry, it's also the change that's going to launch you. You might not see it now, but later you'll look back and say, if that had never happened, I wouldn't be who I am today. You'll realize that season that broke you also built you, that the shift that scared you also shaped you, that the door that closed actually protected you from what would have destroyed you. You'll see it. I promise you will, but right now, you've got to make a decision. You've got to decide to trust that God knows what he's doing even when it doesn't make sense. You've got to believe that your story doesn't end in confusion, it ends in glory. You've got to keep showing up, even when it feels like everything's falling apart, because God does his best work in broken places. He's the kind of God who builds from the rubble, who restores what people said was ruined, who turns your transition into a testimony. So don't be afraid of this change. Don't run from it. Don't shrink in it. This is your moment. This is your stretching. This is the part of your story that will eventually set someone else free. God didn't bring you this far to leave you now. He's still working. He's still moving. And if you let him, he'll take what you're walking through and use it as a platform for your purpose. He's not just changing your situation, he's changing you. So stand tall, keep walking, keep trusting. Because the same God who allowed the shift is the same God who's going to carry you through it. And when you come out on the other side, you'll know it was never falling apart. It was falling into place. You know, when we ask God to take us deeper, when we pray for purpose, for growth, for clarity, what we often forget is that those prayers don't come wrapped in comfort. They come wrapped in challenge, in unfamiliar places, in discomfort. And it's not because God is punishing us. It's because he's developing us. God doesn't grow you in the places where you feel most secure. He grows you in the stretching. He grows you in the tension between where you've been and where he's taking you. Discomfort isn't the enemy, it's the evidence. See, there's something sacred about being uncomfortable, when your spirit starts stirring, when things around you start shifting and you don't quite know what's next. That's not the time to panic. That's the time to pay attention, because God is moving, and when he moves with intention. That stirring you feel, that's not anxiety, that's alignment. God is pulling something out of you that you didn't even know was in there. We love the idea of becoming. Becoming sounds beautiful, it sounds inspiring, but becoming also comes with breaking, with bending, with pressing, with purging. You don't become by staying where you are. You don't become by holding on to what's safe. You don't become by repeating cycles that keep you small. You become when you step into what's uncomfortable and let God transform you in the tension. I remember going through a season where nothing made sense. The doors that used to open closed. The relationships that used to feel solid cracked. The identity I had built my confidence around, it didn't hold me up anymore. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and yes, uncomfortable. But in that very place, God began to reveal who I really was beneath the labels, beneath the expectations, beneath the image. He stripped it all away, not to shame me, but to shape me. That's what God does in discomfort. He peels back the layers so you can meet the version of you that's been buried under survival, under shame, under performance. He introduces you to the woman who's bold, who's anointed, who's healed, who's whole. Not because she avoided the pain, but because she walked through it with him. And listen, walking through it doesn't mean you're fearless. It means you trust him enough to take the next step. Even when it trembles, that trembling doesn't disqualify you. That trembling is proof you're still moving. And if you're still moving, God is still working. He's still forming. He's still molding. Some of us have been praying for God to reveal our next level, but we're trying to bypass the process that prepares us for it. You can't pray for elevation and then reject the pressure. You can't ask God to increase your territory and then complain when the ground starts shaking. The discomfort is preparation. The shaking is what breaks up the shallow soil so the deep roots can take hold. You've been wondering why things feel off, why you don't fit anymore in spaces you used to thrive in, why the conversations, the rhythms, the patterns don't feed you like they used to. That's because your soul is expanding, and expansion is always uncomfortable. That discomfort is God telling you it's time to grow, and sometimes that growth feels lonely. It feels like nobody understands you anymore, like your voice is changing, like your desires are shifting. You're craving something deeper, something real, and that craving, that's divine. That's God awakening you to more than survival, more than performance, more than acceptance. He's calling you into wholeness, but you have to be willing to sit in the tension. That place where you're no longer who you used to be, but not yet who you're becoming. That middle place where your faith is tested, your patience stretched, and your character developed. That place where nobody's clapping, where nobody sees the internal war, where the applause stops, but the transformation begins. Don't rush through that place. God is doing holy work in the hidden place. You're not stuck. You're being strengthened. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. You're not falling apart. You're falling into alignment. I know it doesn't feel good right now. I know you want the answers. You want the breakthrough. You want the peace. But baby girl, the peace comes after the pressing. The clarity comes after the confusion. The confidence comes after the refining. You don't just wake up fearless. You fight through the fear. You face it. You sit in it. You talk to God in it. And eventually, He starts showing you why it had to be this way. And when you get that revelation, everything changes. You stop running from the discomfort and start learning from it. You start recognizing that every painful moment carried purpose. Every tear watered something in your soul. Every delay was a lesson. Every no was protection. Every disruption was divine. You begin to realize that discomfort is actually God's invitation into deeper intimacy with Him, into deeper awareness of yourself, into deeper understanding of your assignment. You stop seeing it as the enemy and start seeing it as the door. This season may not be easy, but it's essential. It's essential to your calling. It's essential to your growth. It's essential to your becoming. So don't despise the discomfort. Don't numb it. Don't avoid it. Don't distract yourself from it. Sit with it. Invite God into it. Let Him show you what He's doing. Let Him show you who you are without the mask, without the performance, without the old narrative. Because when you come through this, you're not just going to be stronger or going to be transformed. You're going to be wiser. You're going to be clearer. You're going to walk with authority that can't be shaken. Because it was built in the fire. You were never meant to stay comfortable. You were meant to evolve. You ever go through a season where it feels like God went quiet, like one day you're hearing Him so clearly, feeling His presence, seeing confirmations, doors are opening, everything feels aligned, and then the next day, silence, no answers, no direction, just quiet, just questions, just stillness, and it starts to feel like maybe you missed it. Maybe you took the wrong turn. Maybe God stopped talking. But what if I told you that silence doesn't mean absence? That just because God isn't speaking the way you're used to doesn't mean He stopped working. We get so uncomfortable with silence because we associate it with separation. We think if we don't feel Him, He's not near. But that's not how God works. God isn't defined by how we feel. He isn't limited by our emotions. He's not intimidated by our confusion. He's still there even in the quiet, even when you're questioning everything. God is strategic even in His silence. Think about it. The teacher is always quiet during the test. Not because they left the room, but because they already gave you everything you needed to pass it. And some of you are in a testing season right now. You've been walking through the fire and you've been asking, God, where are you? But He's saying, I'm here, I've been here, I'm watching, I'm covering, I'm still working behind the scenes. There are some things God does in the dark that can't happen in the light. Some transformations that require solitude, some healing that needs stillness, some growth that only comes in silence. If you always needed to hear Him loud and clear, you'd never learn to recognize Him in the subtle. You'd miss the soft whispers, the divine timing, the strategic delays, because that's what God does. He's strategic with how He shapes us. He knows what we need even when we don't know how to ask. He knows how to lead us even when we can't trace His hand. And sometimes the greatest thing God can do is slow us down so we stop performing and start perceiving. We stop trying to figure it all out and just start trusting that if He said it, He's going to do it, even if we can't see it yet. But let's be honest, that's not easy. It's not easy to trust when nothing looks like the promise. It's not easy to stand firm when the ground beneath you is shaking. It's not easy to believe when you're praying prayers that feel like they're hitting the ceiling. But this is where faith becomes real. Faith isn't proven in the loud moments. It's proven in silence. It's in those moments where you could choose to walk away, to numb out, to settle, but instead you stay. You stay in the Word. You stay on your knees. You stay in the fight, even when it's quiet, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels like nothing's happening. Because what if silence isn't a punishment? What if it's a setup? What if God is preparing a place for you that's bigger than what you prayed for? What if the delay isn't denial, but development? What if the silence is God pulling you closer, not pushing you away? We've been conditioned to crave constant confirmation. We want signs, we want answers, we want a voice from heaven to tell us what to do next. But God isn't interested in raising robots. He's raising sons and daughters who can trust Him even when they don't understand, who can walk by faith, not by sight, who can stand in silence and say, even now I trust you. Because here's the truth. Some of the most powerful moves of God start in silence. The seed doesn't sprout the moment it's planted. It grows in the dark. It takes root before it ever breaks through the soil. It looks like nothing's happening, but everything is shifting, everything is aligning, everything is being prepared. You are the seed, and what's growing inside of you in this season is sacred. The silence is not wasted. It's working. God is building your foundation. He's healing what was broken. He's removing what no longer serves your future. He's preparing you for weight, glory weight, purpose weight, that you couldn't carry in your last season. That quiet season is not to hurt you, it's to anchor you, because when the noise stops, you hear what really matters, you hear your own thoughts, you confront the voices in your head, you start distinguishing between God's truth and your trauma, between your faith and your fear, and in that stillness, you begin to see what you've been running from. You begin to let God touch the parts of you that couldn't be healed in a busy season. That's the beauty of divine silence. It slows you down enough to heal you, and when he finally speaks again, when he opens the door, when the light breaks through, you'll be ready. You won't just have the promise, you'll have the character to sustain it. You won't just have the platform, you'll have the peace to protect it. You won't just have the next level, you'll have the spiritual maturity to handle it. So don't rush the silence, don't despise the stillness. Don't fill it with noise that keeps you distracted. Sit in it, lean into it, let it do its work, because even when he's silent, God is still speaking, and even when you can't see the outcome, he's already written the ending. And when you finally arrive at the thing you were waiting for, praying for, crying for, you'll look back and realize that the silence was never abandonment. It was intimacy, it was protection, it was preparation. And the God who felt quiet in one season will speak so clearly in the next, you'll know without a doubt. He was with you the whole time. You know what's wild. Sometimes the hardest thing God will ever ask you to do isn't climbing the mountain or facing the enemy. It's letting go. Letting go of what's familiar, letting go of what you've outgrown, letting go of what feels right but isn't bearing fruit, and not just letting go of toxic things either. I'm talking about the things that used to serve you. The roles that used to define you, the routines that used to give you confidence, the people who walked with you in a past season but can't come with you into your next. Letting go is hard because we're wired to cling to what gives us comfort. We attach ourselves to things that make us feel secure, and when God starts tugging at our hearts, when he starts whispering, "Release that," our first response isn't always obedience, it's resistance. We start negotiating, bargaining, asking him to let us keep the thing and receive the blessing, but God doesn't operate like that. He's not asking you to let go to punish you. He's asking you to let go to prepare you. You can't carry purpose with your hands full of the past. Some of us are trying to step into a new season with an old mindset, with old patterns, with old attachments that have expired. And the truth is, it's not that God hasn't opened the door, it's that we can't walk through it because we're dragging too much baggage, and he loves us too much to let us carry dead weight into divine destiny. There's a pruning that has to happen when you're growing, and pruning doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel holy. It feels like loss. It feels like grief. It feels like, God, why would you take this from me? But hear me when I say this, everything God removes, he removes with intention. He sees what you can't see. He knows what's waiting around the corner. And he knows that what you're clinging to right now might be the very thing that's keeping you from the freedom you've been crying out for. So he says, let it go. Let go of the identity you built on pain. Let go of the title you thought defined you. Let go of the timeline you created in your head. Let go of the version of you that could survive, but not soar. Because if you don't let go, you'll stay stuck in cycles that look productive, but are actually keeping you stagnant. You'll confuse movement with momentum. You'll keep spinning in the same place because you're afraid to release what you've always known. But what if the very thing you're holding on to is the reason you can't step into healing? What if God is trying to make room for something greater, but your grip on the past is too tight? Letting go isn't about weakness. It's about trust. It's about saying, God, I don't know what's next, but I trust you enough to believe that what's ahead is better than what I'm leaving behind. And that's not easy. That takes courage. That takes surrender. That takes a deep-rooted faith that believes God knows what He's doing even when your heart is breaking. Sometimes letting go means walking away from what once gave you identity. From the place where people knew you, from the circle where you felt celebrated, but not stretched. Because there comes a point where your soul starts craving growth, and you realize that staying would be comfortable, but not transformative. That's when you know it's time to release, and releasing doesn't always look like a big dramatic moment. Sometimes it's a quiet decision, a slow shift, a deep exhale, a boundary, a prayer whispered through tears. God, help me let go of what no longer reflects who you're calling me to be. Because here's what I've learned. There is always a cost to holding on. We don't talk about that enough. There's a cost to staying stuck. There's a cost to refusing to grow. There's a cost to shrinking yourself for the sake of keeping the peace. And eventually, that cost shows up in your peace, your purpose, and your joy. But when you let go, when you finally surrender, that's when freedom floods in. That's when the burden lifts. That's when clarity starts forming. That's when God begins to reveal the next because you trusted Him enough to release the now. And yes, it might hurt. It might feel like you're losing a piece of yourself, but God isn't letting you lose yourself. He's letting you lose what no longer serves the true you, the you He created before the trauma, before the fear, before the striving, before you picked up false identities to survive places that were never meant to sustain you. He's calling you back to yourself, the healed you, the whole you, the you that doesn't need to control everything because she trusts the one who holds it all together. But here's the thing, letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean the memories weren't real or that the love wasn't genuine. It means you've grown. It means you've shifted. It means you've aligned your life with purpose over familiarity. And that is something to celebrate, even if it's wrapped in tears. Because every time you let go of something God never intended for you to carry, you make room for something that will carry you. You make room for peace. You make room for alignment. You make room for joy that doesn't come with conditions. You make room for a love that doesn't require you to shrink. You make room for purpose that doesn't exhaust your soul, but you can't grab hold of what's next with your hands full of what's past. So maybe today is the day you decide to release the grip. Maybe today is the day you finally tell God, I trust you more than I trust this comfort. Maybe today is the day you stop managing what God has already told you to move on from. Because on the other side of letting go is becoming. And you were always meant to become. You ever feel like life is trying to push you into something you didn't ask for? Like one day you're just doing your best to stay afloat. Keeping things together, showing up, doing what you know. And the next day, everything around you starts shifting. People changing, circumstances evolving, God calling, and somewhere deep down you know this isn't random. You know this is more than a moment. It's movement. It's transition. It's a shift you can't ignore. But it's scary because movement means risk, movement means faith, movement means leaving what's familiar and stepping into what's only been whispered to your spirit in the dark. And for some of us, the real fear isn't failure, it's forward. We've gotten so used to surviving that the idea of thriving feels foreign. We've gotten so comfortable with disappointment that the idea of possibility feels threatening. But I need you to hear me, your destiny requires movement. You cannot stay where you are and expect to become who God designed you to be. At some point, the wilderness has to end. At some point, the excuses have to stop. At some point, the false narratives that have kept you bound have to break. And that moment starts when you decide, I'm not staying here anymore, not in this mindset, not in this cycle, not in this fear, not in this place that feels safe but is secretly stifling me. Because here's the thing, God's calling over your life is too big for you to stay small. You weren't meant to stay hidden behind your pain. You weren't created to blend in when God made you to stand out. You weren't designed to repeat what's been modeled to you if it doesn't align with purpose. There's something in you that's meant to move the atmosphere. Something in you that's meant to create change, to break cycles, to open doors for others coming behind you, but none of that happens if you stay stuck. And I get it, stuck feels safe, stuck feels familiar, stuck feels like at least you know what to expect, but familiar doesn't mean fruitful. Just because something is predictable doesn't mean it's purposeful. And if God is nudging you to shift, to stretch, to walk, it's not to punish you, it's to position you. Because movement isn't just about going forward, it's about going deeper. It's about moving in sync with the Spirit. It's about aligning your steps with what heaven is already orchestrating. You've been praying for the promise, but you've been hesitant to make the move. You've been asking for destiny, but avoiding the direction. And God is saying, I can show you, but I won't drag you. He gave you the vision, but now it's your responsibility to take the step. And no, it won't always be clear. No, you won't have all the answers. No, you won't feel ready, but readiness isn't about perfection. It's about obedience. It's about trusting that if God called you to it, He'll sustain you through it. You're not walking into the unknown alone. You're walking with the one who spoke the universe into existence, and sometimes that movement is internal before it's external. Sometimes the first move isn't leaving the job, it's leaving the mindset. Sometimes it's not about changing the environment, it's about changing your expectation. Sometimes the shift starts when you start believing that you actually can live free, that you actually can be used, that you actually can build the thing, write the book, preach the word, raise the children, heal the trauma. You've been waiting for a sign, but the discomfort is the sign. The agitation you feel isn't something to escape, it's something to explore. It's the Spirit letting you know that your spirit is ready for something more. But you can't step into more while dragging your feet in maybe. At some point you've got to get up. You've got to stop analyzing every possible outcome. You've got to stop overthinking and start obeying, because delayed obedience is still disobedience, and I'm not saying you need to have it all figured out. I'm saying you need to trust God enough to say yes, even if you're scared. Even if you failed before, even if you don't feel qualified, God has a way of qualifying the ones who show up, of empowering the ones who say yes, of making a way where there was none, and can I say this gently? You've been sitting on that gift long enough. You've been hiding in the background, cheering everyone else on, suppressing the fire in your own belly. You've been second, guessing the vision because you don't see anyone around you doing it. But just because you haven't seen it modeled doesn't mean it's not possible. You might be the first to do it in your family, but you're not the last. Your movement unlocks somebody else's miracle. When you rise, you give someone else permission to rise too. So don't play small. Don't shrink because you're afraid to be seen. Don't dim your light because it makes others uncomfortable. The world needs the version of you that isn't hiding, that isn't stuck in fear, that isn't living beneath your calling. It's time to move. Move in your thinking, move in your healing, move in your identity, move in your obedience, because your destiny isn't waiting for you to get it all right. It's waiting for you to get up. And yes, the movement might feel shaky at first. It might be filled with questions and doubts and days where you wonder if you're doing the right thing. But one step at a time, one prayer at a time, one act of faith at a time, and you'll look up and realize that the ground beneath your feet has changed. You're not where you were. You're stronger. You're bolder. You're clearer. You're walking in something holy. And what's wild, you'll start noticing that the more you move with God, the more heaven moves with you. Doors will open that you didn't knock on. Resources will find you. Peace will meet you. Strength will sustain you, because when your movement is God-led, it's never in vain. So even if your knees are shaking, walk anyway. Even if your voice trembles, speak anyway. Even if your hands are trembling, build anyway. Even if your heart is still healing, believe anyway, because God doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to move, and if you'll take the step, He'll meet you with grace for the journey.